There is a founder of Hogwarts whose story was deliberately erased from the books, a witch so powerful that her spells still protect the castle 1,000 years later, but whose legacy was reduced to jokes about loyalty and hard work. Helga Hufflepuff wasn't just one of the 4 founders of Hogwarts. She was the glue that held everything together, the witch who saved the school from destruction. And today, you're going to discover why her name should be spoken with the same respect as Godric Gryffindor or Rowena Ravenclaw. Get ready, because the true story of Helga Hufflepuff is going to completely change everything you thought you knew about Hogwarts. But before we dive into this epic journey, I really need your help. We're on a mission to transform this channel into the largest community of fans of the magical universe. If you're enjoying this content, click the subscribe button now, activate the bell so you don't miss any videos, and tell me here in the comments. Which city are you watching from? Let's form our own Order of the Phoenix here in the comments. Now yes, let's go back in time a long time ago to the year 992, almost 1,000 years before Harry Potter was born. Great Britain was a completely different place. The cities we know today didn't exist. There was no electricity, cars, or telephones. It was the Middle Ages, a dark period where ignorance reigned and anything out of the ordinary was seen as the work of the devil. And it was exactly in this hostile and dangerous scenario that one of the most extraordinary witches the magical world has ever known was born. Helga Hufflepuff came into the world somewhere in the valleys of Wales, a mountainous and green region full of mist and mystery. Her family was humble, very different from the aristocratic lineages of Salazar Slytherin or the warrior nobility of Godric Gryffindor. The Hufflepuffs were simple wizards, connected to the earth, who lived in harmony with nature and practiced ancestral magic linked to the cycles of life, to plants, to animals, and to the very essence of the earth. From a very young age, Helga demonstrated a natural talent for enchantments related to food and earth. She could make plants grow with a simple touch, heal wounded animals with her hands, and prepare nutritious potions that could cure everything from a simple cold to more serious illnesses. But what really differentiated Helga from childhood was not just her magical power, it was her heart. While other witch children were taught to hide their powers and fear muggles, Helga was different. She saw goodness in everyone, believed that each person had value, regardless of their blood origin or social status. Her parents, frightened by this attitude, tried to warn her about the dangers of the world, but Helga simply couldn't see evil in people. This characteristic, which many considered naivety, was actually her greatest strength. As she grew, Helga developed impressive magical abilities. She became an expert in food enchantments, an extremely complex and underestimated area of magic. Creating food from nothing is impossible. It's one of the 5 principal exceptions to Gamp's law of elemental transfiguration. But Helga mastered the art of multiplying, transforming, and improving food in ways that seemed to defy the very laws of magic. She also became a master in protection spells and earth enchantments, ancient magics that few wizards still practiced at that time. It was during her travels through Wales, helping isolated wizarding communities and teaching young wizards to control their magic, that Helga met the other 3 founders. The first meeting was with Rowena Ravenclaw, the most intelligent witch of her generation. Rowena was from Scotland, came from a family of scholars, and was obsessed with cataloguing and preserving ancient magical knowledge. The 2 witches couldn't have been more different. Rowena was cold, calculating, driven by logic and intellect. Helga was warm, intuitive, guided by heart and emotion. But strangely, they complemented each other perfectly. Rowena admired Helga's practical wisdom, her connection with ancient forms of magic that couldn't be found in books. Helga, in turn, was fascinated by Rowena's brilliant mind and her ability to understand complex patterns and systems. The meeting with Godric Gryffindor was completely different. Godric was a warrior, a legendary duelist known throughout the magical country for his courage and skill with sword and wand. He came from an ancient lineage of wizards from the west of England, near the region that would one day be known as Godric's Hollow. Godric had a magnetic personality, was charismatic, brave to the point of recklessness, and believed that magic should be used to protect the weak and fight against injustice. When he met Helga, he was immediately impressed. Here was a witch who wasn't afraid of anything, who walked openly among muggles and wizards, helping everyone without distinction. Godric saw in Helga a different kind of courage from his own. Not the courage of the warrior who faces the enemy head-on, but the courage of the heart that remains kind, even in a cruel world. The last to join the group was Salazar Slytherin, and his meeting with Helga was tense from the start. Salazar was an aristocrat to the bone, came from an ancient and powerful pure-blood family, and fervently believed in the superiority of pure-blood wizards. He was brilliant, there was no doubt, a master in dark arts and parseltongue, the rare ability to speak with serpents. When Salazar met Helga and discovered that she taught magic to anyone who demonstrated talent, regardless of their lineage, he was horrified. For Salazar, this was more than imprudent, it was dangerous. He believed that teaching magic to Muggleborns was sharing the secrets of the wizarding community with those who could betray them. Helga and Salazar had heated discussions from day one, but strangely, there was mutual respect between them. Salazar recognized Helga's immense power and knowledge, even completely disagreeing with her ideals. And Helga, despite vehemently rejecting Salazar's beliefs about blood purity, saw in him not a monster, but a wizard with fear. Someone traumatized by the persecutions that wizards suffered at the hands of Muggles during those dark times. It was the end of the 10th century, and the magical world was in crisis. The witch hunts were intensifying throughout Europe. People saw any manifestation of magic as heresy, and superstitious Muggles burned innocent people at the stake, often just for being different or for having knowledge of medicinal herbs. Young wizards grew up in fear, without proper training, causing magical accidents that exposed the wizarding community even more. There was no school of magic in Great Britain, no safe place where magical children could learn to control their powers. It was Rowena Ravenclaw who first suggested the idea of building a school. She was frustrated seeing so much magical knowledge being lost because there was no adequate educational system. Godric Gryffindor immediately supported it, seeing in the school a way to create a new generation of wizards strong enough to defend themselves. Salazar Slytherin agreed, but only if the school accepted only pure-blood students, and that's where Helga Hufflepuff made her position absolutely clear. She argued, with a passion that surprised even Godric, that the school should accept all magical students without exception. It didn't matter if they were pure-bloods, half-bloods, or Muggleborns. It didn't matter if they were rich or poor, talented or just average. Everyone deserved the chance to learn, to develop their talents, to have a safe place to call home. Helga deeply believed that denying education to someone because of their origin was not only unfair, but stupid. Magic chose whom it wanted. It didn't follow family lineages or social rules, and wasting magical talent because of prejudice was a foolishness the wizarding community couldn't afford to commit. This discussion almost destroyed the partnership before it even began. Salazar threatened to abandon the project, but it was Helga, always the mediator, always the one who saw the best in people, who proposed a solution. Each founder would have their own house in the school, could choose their own students according to their criteria, teach their own values, but all students, regardless of house, would receive the same quality education, would have access to the same library, would eat in the same common hall. The houses would be different but equal. It would be a school united in diversity. Rowena saw the genius of this solution immediately. Godric agreed enthusiastically. Salazar reluctantly accepted. And thus was born the idea of the 4 houses of Hogwarts. But the hardest part was still missing, finding a place to build the school. It needed to be isolated enough to keep it secret from Muggles, but accessible enough so that families from all over the country could send their children. It needed space for gardens, Quidditch fields, and all the facilities that a proper school required. The construction of Hogwarts was a monumental project that took several years. Each founder contributed with their unique expertise. Rowena Ravenclaw designed the castle's structure, creating an impossible architecture that defied the laws of Muggle physics, with moving staircases, corridors that changed places, rooms that appeared and disappeared. Godric Gryffindor established the military defenses, creating protection spells against invaders, establishing the guard system, and ensuring that the castle could withstand any attack. Salazar Slytherin built the hydraulic systems and the dungeons, using his ability with Parseltongue to create secret passages and hideouts that only he knew completely. But it was Helga Hufflepuff who made the real magic happen. She created the Hogwarts kitchens, one of the greatest feats of domestic magic ever accomplished. Those kitchens weren't just a place to prepare food, they were a magical miracle. Helga enchanted the very ground beneath the kitchens, connecting it to the fertile land of the valley, creating a system that allowed producing food for hundreds of people, 3 times a day, every day, for centuries. She brought house elves to work in the kitchens, but not as slaves. Helga had enormous respect for house elves, saw in them talented magical creatures who deserved purpose and dignity. She created a symbiotic relationship where the elves had a home, purpose, and were treated with respect, something revolutionary for that time. Helga was also responsible for creating Hogwarts gardens and greenhouses. She personally planted each tree on the grounds, choosing rare magical species that would form the Forbidden Forest. This forest wasn't just decoration, it was part of the school's defense system. Helga populated the forest with magical creatures that she personally domesticated or convinced to live there. Unicorns, centaurs, thestrals, and many other species. She created a complete magical ecosystem, balanced and self-sustaining. But Helga's greatest contribution to Hogwarts was something few know or truly appreciate. She created the heart of the school. While Rowena worried about knowledge, Godric about courage, and Salazar about ambition, Helga worried about something more fundamental. She wanted Hogwarts to be a home. She enchanted the entire castle with spells of comfort and belonging, subtle but powerful magics that made everyone who entered Hogwarts feel welcomed, safe, at home. These spells still work today, 1,000 years later. That's why students love Hogwarts so much, why the castle seems to have a soul of its own. It's Helga's magic, still alive and pulsing in the very stones of the castle. Hufflepuff House was established in the castle's basements, near the kitchens. Many found it strange that Helga chose the basements when she could have had any part of the castle. But Helga explained her choice with perfect logic. She wanted her students to be close to the earth, connected to the soil, to the castle's foundations. Hufflepuff's common room was cozy, illuminated by golden light, decorated with plants and wood, with fireplaces always lit and comfortable armchairs. It was the coziest place in all of Hogwarts. As for selection criteria, Helga was unique among the founders. Rowena chose the most intelligent, Godric wanted the bravest, Salazar selected the most ambitious and pure-blooded. But Helga had a different philosophy. She said she would accept all those whom the other founders rejected, but this wasn't because her house was inferior. It was because she saw value where others didn't. Helga valued loyalty, hard work, patience, justice, and honesty. She believed that these qualities, often underestimated, were actually the most important of all. And she was right. Hufflepuff students may not have always been the brightest, the bravest, or the most ambitious, but they were reliable, honest, and hard-working. They were the kind of person you could trust in a crisis, who wouldn't give up when things got tough, who would do the right thing even when no one was watching. Helga understood something many didn't. Talent without character is useless, but character with hard work can achieve anything. The early years of Hogwarts were difficult. The founders had different visions about how the school should be run. Rowena wanted intense academic focus. Godric wanted dueling and defense training. Salazar insisted on keeping Muggleborns separate from purebloods, and there were constantly conflicts, heated discussions, threats to abandon the project. It was always Helga who mediated these conflicts. She had a natural talent for diplomacy, for finding middle ground, for making people with completely opposite views work together. She organized dinners where the founders were forced to sit together and talk as friends, not as adversaries. She reminded everyone why they had started this project, for the children, for future generations of wizards who deserved something better than living in fear, hidden, without proper education. But there was one conflict that not even Helga could completely resolve: Salazar Slytherin's growing obsession with blood purity. As the years passed and more Muggleborns were admitted to Hogwarts, Salazar became increasingly bitter. He saw each Muggleborn as a potential threat, a spy who could reveal Hogwarts' location to witch hunters. His classes began to include propaganda about pureblood superiority, and he began to treat Muggleborn students with open disdain. Helga confronted Salazar multiple times about this. She tried to make him understand that he was allowing fear and prejudice to poison his heart. She argued that Muggleborns weren't enemies. They were frightened children who needed help just as much as any pureblood. But Salazar didn't listen. His paranoia grew each day. Salazar, proud and intransigent, couldn't accept being contradicted. He decided to leave Hogwarts, but not before creating one last threat. He secretly built a hidden chamber in the depths of the castle, below even the dungeons. Inside this chamber, he placed a basilisk, a giant and deadly serpent that could only be controlled by someone who spoke Parseltongue. He left instructions that one day an heir of his would return to Hogwarts, open the Chamber of Secrets, and release the basilisk to purify the school, removing all those he considered unworthy of studying magic. When Helga discovered what Salazar had done, she was devastated. Not by the betrayal itself, but because she had failed. She always believed she could reach the best in people, that with enough patience and understanding, anyone could change. But Salazar proved she was wrong. Some people simply didn't want to be saved from their own darkness. This was a painful lesson for Helga, one she would carry for the rest of her life. After Salazar's departure, the three remaining founders tried to find the Chamber of Secrets, but Salazar had hidden it very well. Even with all their combined power and knowledge, they couldn't locate it. Eventually, they decided to focus on strengthening Hogwarts' protections, adding more layers of security spells, and ensuring the school continued functioning and prospering despite the abandonment of one of the founders. Helga took on even more responsibilities after Salazar's departure. She practically became Hogwarts' operational manager, ensuring everything functioned perfectly, that students were well fed, that facilities were always in good condition, that problems were resolved before becoming crises. She also became the favorite teacher of many students, especially those who felt out of place or who struggled to find their place in the school. But Helga wasn't just kind. She was also incredibly powerful. There was a reason why Salazar Slytherin, despite his prejudice, never tried to confront Helga directly. She was one of the most powerful witches of her time, specialized in forms of magic that most wizards underestimated. Her abilities in food and earth enchantment seemed harmless, but in the right hands, they were devastating. One of Helga Hufflepuff's greatest magical feats was the creation of her cup. Each founder created a powerful magical object that represented their values and abilities. Godric Gryffindor had his sword, forged by goblins and imbued with properties that made it absorb anything that would make it stronger. Rowena Ravenclaw created her diadem, which supposedly increased the wisdom of whoever wore it. Salazar Slytherin had his locket, an object of considerable power linked to his abilities in dark arts. Helga's cup was different. It wasn't a weapon like Godric's sword. It didn't enhance attributes like Rowena's diadem. It didn't have dark purposes like Salazar's locket. Helga's cup represented abundance, generosity, and care. It was made of pure gold, decorated with 2 badgers, the animal symbol of her house, and had the ability to produce any drink its user desired in unlimited quantity. But it wasn't just that. The cup also had subtle healing properties. Any liquid served in it had the power to strengthen, invigorate, and slightly heal whoever drank it. More importantly, Helga enchanted the cup with a unique protection spell. The cup only worked for those of pure heart who had genuine intentions of helping others. Anyone who tried to use the cup for selfish or malicious purposes would discover it simply didn't work. It was the perfect magical object to represent Helga's ideals. Power put at the service of the common good, magic used to nurture and care, not to dominate or destroy. As the years passed, Hogwarts grew and prospered. The school became recognized throughout the magical world as the best magical teaching institution. Students came from important families and from humble origins, purebloods and muggleborns, all learning side by side. And it worked. Despite all the differences, despite all the conflicts, it worked. And much of the credit for that went to Helga Hufflepuff. But Helga was aging. Even powerful wizards aren't immortal, and time takes its toll. Helga had dedicated decades of her life to Hogwarts, working tirelessly to ensure the school was everything she had dreamed. She had taught hundreds of students, resolved 1,000 conflicts, created a legacy that would last millennia. But her body was tired. Her hair had completely whitened. Her hands were no longer as steady holding her wand. Godric Gryffindor was the first of the founders to die, falling in battle defending a wizarding village from hunters. His death devastated Helga. Godric was like a brother to her, one of the few who truly understood her vision for Hogwarts. The school organized a grand funeral, and Godric's sword was placed in the headmaster's office as an eternal reminder of his courage. Rowena Ravenclaw was next. There is a tragic story about her death, involving her daughter Helena and the stolen diadem, but that's a subject for another time. What matters is that Helga lost another dear friend. Suddenly, she was the last one, the last of the original founders still alive. Salazar had disappeared decades before and was never seen again. Godric and Rowena were dead. Helga was alone, carrying the weight of preserving the dream that 4 extraordinary wizards had shared. Helga also created the Sorting Hat, together with the other founders, before their deaths. Each founder placed a bit of their thoughts, their personality, and their selection criteria in the hat. Rowena, being the most intelligent, led the process. But it was Helga who gave the hat its most important characteristic: empathy. The hat didn't just analyze students' qualities, but also considered where they would be happiest, where they would have the best chance to prosper. This was Helga's contribution, ensuring that no one was placed in a house where they would be unhappy just because they technically fit the criteria. In her last days, Helga asked to be taken to the Hogwarts gardens that she had created with so much love. She wanted to be close to the earth, feel the sun on her face, hear the wind in the trees she herself had planted centuries ago. Students and teachers came to visit her, each one wanting to thank her, say goodbye, express how much she meant to them. One of the most touching moments was when a Muggle-born Hufflepuff student, a girl who had been rejected even by her own Muggle family when they discovered she was a witch, came to thank Helga. The girl was crying, holding the founder's wrinkled hands, saying that Hogwarts, and specifically Hufflepuff House, had been the first place where she really felt at home, where she was accepted exactly as she was. Helga smiled, caressed the girl's face, and said something that became one of the most famous phrases attributed to her. "Hogwarts will always be your home, my dear. No matter where you go or what you become, you will always have a place here, because here everyone belongs." And this phrase perfectly sums up Helga Hufflepuff's philosophy. While other founders focused on creating the best wizards, the most intelligent, the bravest, the most ambitious, Helga focused on creating good people. She understood that the magical world needed more than brilliant warriors or genius scholars. It needed reliable, honest people who would do the right thing even when no one was watching. It needed people who valued community above individualism, who understood that true strength comes from working together, not from competing against each other. Helga Hufflepuff died in peace, surrounded by flowers and plants she loved, with the sound of students laughing and talking in the distance, the sound of Hogwarts alive and prosperous. She was almost 120 years old, an impressive age even by wizarding standards. In the centuries that followed Helga's death, her reputation suffered a strange and unfair transformation. Hufflepuff House, which should have been celebrated for its admirable values, began to be seen as the house of mediocrities, of those who weren't good enough for the other houses. This was absurdly unfair and completely contrary to what Helga had established. She didn't accept students because they were mediocre. She accepted them because she saw potential in them that others didn't see. The truth is that Hufflepuff House produced some of the most extraordinary wizards in history, but they were often ignored because they didn't fit the dramatic stereotype of the brave hero, the brilliant genius, or the ambitious conqueror. Hufflepuffs did their work quietly, without fanfare, without seeking recognition. They were the healers who worked long hours at St. Mungo's Hospital saving lives. They were the loyal Ministry of Magic employees who kept the government running. They were the dedicated teachers who shaped future generations. They were the reliable auras who could be counted on in any situation. One of the most notable examples was Artemisia Lufkin, a Hufflepuff who became the first female Minister of Magic in Great Britain in the 19th century. She revolutionized the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, establishing laws that protected vulnerable creatures and punished those who mistreated them. Artemisia perfectly embodied Helga's values: hard work, justice, and care for those who couldn't defend themselves. Another example was Newt Scamander, author of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, the textbook used at Hogwarts for generations. Newt was a classic Hufflepuff, dedicated, hard-working, more interested in understanding and protecting magical creatures than in personal glory. He traveled the world, cataloging magical species, saving endangered animals, and contributing more to magizoology knowledge than any other wizard of his time. But he did all this discreetly, without seeking spotlights or recognition. There was also Grogan Stump, another Hufflepuff who became Minister of Magic and is considered one of the most effective and fair ministers in history. It was during his tenure that the modern definition of being versus beast was established. Complex and controversial work that required exactly the kind of patience, justice, and hard work that Helga valued. But perhaps the greatest testament to Helga's legacy came during the darkest moments in wizarding history. During Voldemort's rise, when the magical world was divided and terrorized, Hufflepuff House showed its true worth. In the Battle of Hogwarts, when Voldemort and his Death Eaters attacked the school, Hufflepuff House was the second house with the most members who stayed to fight, losing only to Gryffindor. Think about that for a moment. The supposed mediocrities, The boring ones, the common workers, stayed to fight against the most powerful dark wizard of all time, not because they were the bravest, not because they were the most powerful, but because it was the right thing to do. Hufflepuff's loyalty to Hogwarts, to its values and to each other, proved to be stronger than fear. This is exactly what Helga had taught. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing what needs to be done despite the fear. And on that terrible day, the Hufflepuffs proved they were as brave as any Gryffindor, as smart as any Ravenclaw, and certainly more trustworthy than many Slytherins. It's also important to talk about Helga's cup and its tragic fate. Centuries after Helga's death, the cup passed from generation to generation within her descendant family. Eventually, it came into the hands of Hepzibah Smith, a wealthy witch and collector of magical antiquities. Hepzibah had the cup as one of her most precious possessions, keeping it locked in her vault along with Salazar Slytherin's locket, which she also possessed. But fate had terrible plans for Helga's cup. A young wizard named Tom Riddle, who would become Lord Voldemort, was obsessed with collecting objects from the Hogwarts founders. He deceived Hepzibah, killed her, and stole both Helga's cup and Salazar's locket. But Voldemort didn't want these objects for their historical value or the magic they contained. He wanted to use them for his darkest purpose, transform them into Horcruxes. Voldemort took Helga Hufflepuff's cup, an object created to nurture and heal, a symbol of generosity and kindness, and defiled it in the worst possible way. He committed a murder and used that heinous act to split his soul, hiding a fragment of it inside the cup. He transformed an object of light into a receptacle of absolute darkness. If Helga could have seen what was done with her cup, it would have broken her heart. The Horcrux cup was eventually hidden in the Lestrange family vault at Gringotts, the Wizarding Bank, protected by multiple spells and the Goblin's own paranoid security. It stayed there for decades, a piece of Voldemort's soul pulsing with dark magic inside an object that should have represented everything good in the magical world. It was only during the Second Wizarding War that Harry Potter, Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger broke into Gringotts on a desperate mission to destroy the Horcrux. They managed to steal the cup, escaped riding a dragon, and eventually Hermione destroyed it using a basilisk fang in the Chamber of Secrets. When the fang pierced the cup, the fragment of Voldemort's soul was destroyed in a horrible scream, and Helga Hufflepuff's cup was finally freed from the corruption that had stained it. But even in destruction, there was something poetically appropriate. The cup was destroyed in the Chamber of Secrets, the place Salazar Slytherin had built in his arrogance and prejudice. Helga's object, which represented inclusion and acceptance, was purified in the very place that symbolized Salazar's hatred and exclusion. It was as if, even 1,000 years after her death, Helga was still fighting against Salazar's dark ideals. Returning to Helga herself and her impact on Hogwarts, it's fascinating to observe how her practices and philosophies permeated the entire school, not just her own house. The house point system, for example, rewarded not just courage or intelligence, but also hard work and ethical behavior, typically Hufflepuff values. The fact that Hogwarts always had a welcoming atmosphere, that students of all origins felt at home there, this was a direct result of the spells and philosophy that Helga had imbued in the castle itself. Helga was also responsible for establishing many of Hogwarts' traditions that continue to this day. The Welcome Feast, for example, with its tables full of delicious food and its festive atmosphere, was Helga's idea. She believed that starting the school year with a joyful celebration helped students, especially first years, feel welcome and excited about the year ahead. It's also crucial to discuss Helga's relationship with magical creatures. While other wizards of the time saw many creatures as dangerous or inferior, Helga treated them with respect and dignity. She was particularly close to house elves, as already mentioned, but also had a special affinity with badgers, which became her house's animal symbol. Badgers were chosen by Helga because they perfectly represented her values. Badgers are animals that work hard, digging extensive underground burrows. They're loyal to their families and fiercely protective of their homes. Despite their cute and stocky appearance, badgers are formidable warriors when threatened, capable of facing much larger animals. They're often underestimated, exactly like Hufflepuff House itself. Helga saw in the badger's nature a mirror of her own ideals, humble but strong, gentle but fierce when necessary, dedicated and reliable. Helga also maintained a colony of magical badgers on Hogwarts grounds. These badgers were larger and more intelligent than their muggle cousins, capable of understanding simple commands and even helping with basic gardening tasks. They became part of Hogwarts' ecosystem, helping to aerate the garden soil and protecting the roots of the most delicate magical plants. Another fascinating aspect of Helga's legacy is how she influenced the relationship between Hogwarts and Hogsmeade, the nearby wizarding village. Hogsmeade was founded at approximately the same time as Hogwarts, and Helga established a symbiotic relationship between the school and the village. Hogwarts provided security and brought commerce to Hogsmeade, while the village provided supplies and a place for older students to visit and interact with the broader wizarding community. Helga personally negotiated agreements with merchants and craftsmen from Hogsmeade, establishing commercial relationships that last to this day. The Three Broomsticks, Honeydukes, and other iconic Hogsmeade shops were established in part because of the economic stimulus that Hogwarts provided. Helga saw this as an extension of her philosophy of community and mutual cooperation. It's also worth mentioning Helga's contribution to Hogwarts' curriculum. While each founder had their favorite subjects, Helga insisted that all students, regardless of house, have a complete and balanced education. She fought against the tendency for early specialization, arguing that young wizards needed a broad foundation of knowledge before choosing their areas of focus. Helga personally taught several disciplines. She was a professor of herbology, household charms, and occasionally gave classes on care of magical creatures. Her classes were famous for being practical and accessible. Helga had a gift for explaining complex concepts in ways anyone could understand. She used simple analogies, everyday examples, and always had infinite patience with students who took longer to learn. One of her most innovative teaching practices was what we today call hands-on or practical learning. Helga believed that simply reading about magic in books wasn't enough. Students needed to practice, experiment, make mistakes, and learn from them. Her classes frequently involved long projects where students planted and cared for their own magical plants, prepared complex potions from start to finish, or created useful household charms they could use in real life. This practical teaching approach was revolutionary for the time and influenced how magic was taught at Hogwarts for centuries afterward. Even today, teachers like Pomona Sprout in herbology follow teaching methods that can be traced directly back to Helga Hufflepuff. And so we come to the end of Helga Hufflepuff's extraordinary journey, the founder who proved that kindness is not weakness, that loyalty is the rarest of magics, and that true greatness lies in lifting others up, not in placing yourself above them. 1,000 years after her death, her spells still protect Hogwarts, her kitchens still feed generations of students, and her values still echo in the corridors of the castle she helped build. Helga taught us that we don't need to be the brightest, the bravest, or the most ambitious to leave an indelible mark on the world. We just need to be fair, work hard, and never lose the ability to see the best in people. Her cup was defiled, but eventually purified. Her house was ridiculed, but stood firm when it mattered most. And her legacy, though often forgotten, is possibly the most important of all the founders. Because in the end, when all the glory fades and all the trophies gather dust, what really remains is how we treat each other, how we build communities, and whether we had the courage to be kind in a world that often confuses kindness with weakness. Helga Hufflepuff knew this 1,000 years ago, and her lesson resonates truer today than ever. Thank you for watching until the end. Don't forget to leave your like, subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. Until the next video.